Hello YouTube, it is I, Vincent, back again with yet another video. And today we're going to be revisiting the topic of Gibson because you guys seem to really enjoy when I drag Gibson in these videos. So today we're going to be revisiting the topic of Gibson and their overzealous legal department and going over every single lawsuit that Gibson has levied against anybody. I was going to say just guitar brands there, but funnily enough, it actually is not limited to just guitar brands. I already made a video in the past kind of discussing why Gibson is a lot more aggressive in their approach to litigation than, for example, Fender. So I'm not going to really go too much in depth about it. You can go watch that video if you feel so inclined to learn more about that. But this video in particular is going to more so go over each specific lawsuit. Preface for all of this, I'm going to try to keep everything pretty brief because one, I want to keep this relatively digestible in length, and two, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to really go into specifics about legal stuff that I don't really understand all that well. With all that being said, let's get right into it and talk about the first brand that I have here. So pretty recently, Gibson actually tried to go after Kiesel for two of their shapes, the Ultra V and the CS. They claimed that the Ultra V was a violation of the trademark for the Flying V, and they claimed that the CS was infringing on the Les Paul shape. They didn't actually take this to court, they just sent Kiesel a cease and desist, and in response to this, Jeff Kiesel actually made a video Jesus Christ. A video of his own responding to it, talking about how absolutely egregious the claims are, specifically because the Ultra V is an offset V shape that is very, very pointy and looks absolutely nothing like a Flying V. Not to mention that Kiesel has also been making this shape since 1985 under the name Carvin. So they've been making this guitar for 10 years before Gibson even had the trademark for the Flying V. As of right now, this hasn't really evolved into anything else. Gibson hasn't taken this to court or anything, but this happened in 2020s, and these things tend to happen pretty slowly, so who knows if Gibson will actually further pursue this. Bringing it back to something a little bit older, we're gonna talk about ESP, one of the biggest thorns in Gibson's sides in all of history. So in the mid-1980s, ESP introduced their Explorer copy. This was called the EXP, and it functionally looked identical to an Explorer. Fast forward to the 90s, and they've continued making this shape, and it's become a little bit more and more Explorer influenced as time went on. Because they flew a little bit too close to the sun, Gibson ended up suing them in the late 1990s, leading ESP to discontinue the shape and then redesign the entire thing, making it a lot more angular and pointy to avoid any further legal action in the future. There also exists the era of ESP eclipses that are dubbed the pre-lawsuit eclipses that have the much rounder horn and have a 4-volume knob layout. But when I was looking into this, I couldn't actually find any evidence anywhere talking about any lawsuit regarding this. It just seems like ESP kind of stopped offering this in America just to maybe potentially be safe. But in any case, ESP did change their Eclipse shape and control layout in order to be more unique so that they wouldn't get sued for that. Moving on to a company that is also known for their lawsuit era guitars, Ibanez. Now this goes a little bit further back, all the way back to the 1970s. Now way back before Ibanez was known for their super shredder shapes like the RG and the Gem, they were actually known for making extremely high quality Gibson clones. Gibson was not particularly a fan of that because they were rivaling the quality at a fraction of the price, and the guitar that was the straw to break the camel's back was the Ibanez Super Standard Les Paul. Now looking at the guitar, it is very obvious why Gibson would want to go after this. I mean, come on, look at it. It is literally a Les Paul down to the headstock shape. And that use of the open book headstock shape that Gibson is known for is the specific reason that Gibson went after Ibanez. Ultimately, they settled out of court with the details not really being disclosed to anybody, but this lawsuit ended up being actually a pretty major landmark in Ibanez's history, because after this they actually prioritized making their own original shapes and upping the quality of their guitars. So in the end, this was all for the best, and Ibanez is much better for it in the end. Now moving on to the 2000s, we have Gibson going after Paul Reed Smith PRS guitars over the creation of the SC shape, which is PRS's take on the iconic single-cut guitar. Now, in January of 2000, PRS unveiled the PRS SC to the world, and everybody loved it. It was amazing, it was so cool. And then less than a year later, in November, Gibson sued them in the Nashville courts. And unfortunately, in 2004, the courts ended up ruling in favor of Gibson, and PRS was ordered to stop making the shape. But this is not the end to this story, because PRS was successfully able to get an appeal and during this appeal, they actually won. So after they won this appeal in 2005, they ended up resuming production in 2006. And now we still got the PRS SC today. Now moving on to probably the most public and most recent Gibson lawsuit that's got everybody's panties up in a bunch. We got the lawsuit against Dean Guitars, which is actually still having updates to this day, funnily enough. So all the way back in 2017, Gibson actually sent a cease and desist to Dean Guitars over the use of the Cadillac, the V, and the Z shape. In response to this, Dean did absolutely nothing. They just kept moving on, business as standard. So Gibson said, all right, and then in 2019, they actually took him to court, claiming that those specific shapes were infringing on the rights of the Flying V, the Explorer, the ES, the SG, and the Dove Wing headstock. Now, the end result of this was pretty up in the air, but in 2022, the judge actually ruled in favor of Gibson. However, this was not really a clear-cut victory for Gibson because they were seeking $14 million in damages, but the court only awarded them with $4,000, which is a drop in the bucket. The $4,000 is absolutely nothing. The reason for this is that the judge claimed that Gibson was, and I quote, Gibson was delayed in asserting its trademark rights for these models. Much like PRS did, Dean also filed for an appeal. And much like PRS, they also got approved for the appeal. However, unlike PRS, they did not win the battle because as of March 21st, 2025, very recently, they lost their second trial and they had to pay a comical singular dollar in damages. So ultimately, while Gibson did win these lawsuits, this was not really a win for Gibson in the end. All right, that is all the brands I'm gonna be talking about today. I did not realize how long this video was getting. So lucky for you guys, you get a part 2 of this. You get to learn even more. Yay! We still got a lot more brands to talk about in the second part of this video, so be sure to subscribe so you guys know whenever that one comes out. And if you guys found anything informative about this video, be sure to leave a like and a comment. Which lawsuit do you think has been the most crazy so far? And which lawsuits are you excited to learn about next? With all that being said, that is all for now. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.